Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everyone. I am thrilled, delighted, and excited to introduce my guest today, Alisha Fernandez Miranda. Alisha is the author of My What If Year. She serves as chair and former CEO of IG Advisors, an award-winning social impact intelligence agency that consults with the world's biggest nonprofits, foundations, and corporations on their philanthropy and social initiatives. A graduate of Harvard University and the London School of Economics, her writing has been featured in Vogue, Business Insider, Romper, and Huffington Post. Originally from Miami, she currently lives in Scotland with her husband and children. Please join me in welcoming Alisha Fernandez Miranda. Welcome, Alisha.
Woo! Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so happy to have you here. I love your book, My What If Year. I can't wait till we get to the point in the interview when we're talking about it, which we'll get to soon. But take us back to the beginning. As you know, on Work from the Inside Out, we love to learn a little bit about your formative years and how those may have informed where you are today. So take us there.
So I am currently in Scotland, but I was not born here. I was born in Miami, Florida. My dad was a Cuban immigrant. He moved to the U.S. in the 60s. And my mom was a nice Jewish girl from North Miami Beach, born and raised in North Miami. And they met at the University of Florida, and I was their oldest child. And from my very early days, man, I was like a really ambitious kid, a very type A, the kind of girl you'd call bossy. I was all right with that. I really never minded that term personally. And I had a real drive to be the best always, whether it came from my parents, whether it came from something innate. You know, I remember being in kindergarten and winning the spelling bee, and that being like I can remember that day. I remember it so clearly. You know,
wow.
That was my drive. I always wanted to be the best. And when I was 8 years old, I had a diary that I kept. I wrote in it that my goal for my life was to go to Harvard. I don't even know how I heard of Harvard. I didn't know anybody that went to Harvard.
Wow.
Legally Blonde was not out yet, so I didn't have Elle Woods to like blame for that. That was like so my driving force. So you ask about my formative years. I mean, I was a really academic kid. I was a very social kid as well. So I was like always joining everything I could in all the clubs and, you know, just loved being around people, loved learning, and loved being the best. And I had a very, you know, like I was raised in suburban Miami. So I had like one of these very, you know, middle-class suburban upbringings. We went on our summer vacations were road trips to Gainesville, Florida, to Atlanta, and to North Carolina. And that was pretty much my whole life until I turned 18. And then two big things happened then. I took my first trip out of the US, which impacted everything, made me obsessed with travel, with being abroad, with experiencing as much of the world as I could. And I got into Harvard, and I went to Harvard, which also changed very much how I looked at the world in a different way and how I understood what was happening in the world around me.
Wow. Now, did you maintain that goal of going to Harvard all those years from 8 years old on? Like, was that was on the radar the whole time?
I don't know if you've watched Gilmore Girls, one of my favorite television shows, but I was like Rory Gilmore. Like I had the board, I had the pennants, had the t-shirts. That was my goal. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't gotten in.
Let me just say this.
Massive meltdown.
Coffee, coffee, coffee.
I was counting actually the number of like Gilmore Girls related paraphernalia I have in my house. It's a lot.
Let's just say I have a t-shirt that says Luke's on it.
I was drinking from my Luke's mug this morning. I have two of them. I love that show is like my it's even in my bio actually. Like I'm constantly telling people how much I love that show. But yeah, I mean, that was the goal I maintained. my dad used to say to me, you can go to University of Florida, which was his alma mater, or Harvard. And there was nothing in between for him. It was like those two.
Really?
Yeah, it was those two. So I did apply. Did I apply anywhere else? I applied early to Harvard and I got in early. So I don't actually think I ended up applying anywhere else.
What did you study at Harvard?
Well, I studied women's studies, which was not part of the original plan.
No?
But I had been so focused on like getting to Harvard that when I got there, I had no idea what I wanted to study. I had been
That's interesting.
Yeah. It was like your classic liberal arts major. Didn't know what I wanted to do.
Given that you were so ambitious and type A and all that, I would think you would have also been so focused too.
I guess I sort of thought maybe I would be an English major. I had been very into journalism in high school. I was editor of my school newspaper. I did an internship, my very first internship at Ocean Drive magazine. I love this, Tammy. We have so much in common.
I can't begin to tell you everything. I'm listening. The audience doesn't know I'm sitting here shaking my head up and down,
nodding along with me. I thought journalism was going to be the way. And I did an internship my senior year of high school that at Ocean Drive, Miami kind of fashion luxury magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just met by very unhappy people, This was even well before, this was still in the like heyday of glossy magazines. This was well before everybody was like, exit journalism while you can, everything's shutting down.
Right.
It's like 99, 2000. So, but people didn't seem very happy. And I remember my freshman year, I went to the Crimson, to kind of like the open meeting of the Harvard Crimson to see. And, I was really, really intimidated. That first year, especially at Harvard, I was very intimidated by everything. I had always been the big fish in my like relatively small pond. And then when I got there and everybody else was as good, if not better than me, I found that transition really difficult. So I didn't even go out for the paper. I was like, I was scared. I was scared of the competition. I was scared of failing. And then I thought maybe I would be an English major. But I think what really happened is that I started taking, you had to take a number of different classes. It was the core curriculum. So I was taking a music class and an anthropology class and a math class. And I loved all of it, except maybe the math so much. And I found women's studies as it was built to me as an interdisciplinary degree. So you take any class in any department. If it has to do with gender, it counts towards your major. And I wasn't ready to say I wanted to be an economics major or an English major or anything like that. So I loved the variety. I think that probably is no surprise if you've read my book and see that I love doing a whole bunch of different kinds of jobs. But I loved women's studies was a way to look at the world, really, and to analyze what was happening around you. And so I loved it. I loved the theory and I loved the classes that I got to take.
And you got to live in the snow too.
Yeah, I didn't love that part.
You didn't love that part?
Winter was fine. I was excited. But like Miami girl shows up, as a New Yorker, you won't understand this really. Like I showed up, I didn't have any shoes except one pair of tennis shoes that were closed-toed shoes. I had never even owned closed-toed shoes. My tops for going out were like backless. I had like one pea coat I bought at Filene's Basement. Like I did not know what I was getting into. The first real Boston snow, I thought I was going to die. I was like, how do people live like this?
That's so funny. That's so funny that you showed up there without. Yeah, but I understand. And then now from there, you went to the London School of Economics. Is that right? So
that's right.
Tell us a little bit about that connection. What spurred you on to you went right into grad school. Is that right?
Right into graduate school. Yeah. So, as I mentioned, when I turned 18, I took my first trip out of the US. I went to Seville in southern Spain with my aunt and my cousin for a month over the summer at my aunt's invitation. And I fell in love with Europe. I fell in love with travel. I fell in love with that feeling of kind of constantly having to figure out your bearings and being that sort of fish out of water. I mean, again, so it was all leading up to these internships, I think, when you really think about it. And so I had gone back to Europe for my spring break. I went summer after my freshman year. I went summer after my sophomore year. I basically worked to pay for plane tickets. Like that was what I did. wasn't buying clothes. I was really just figuring out how I could travel. I worked part-time jobs all through college. And I did a semester abroad my junior year in London.
Oh, okay.
I loved it. I loved it. And I was there. It was when the Iraq War first broke out. And I had a real awakening, I think, like many Americans who travel abroad. I started to see the world in a different way. I had more of a political awakening. I felt like I had really been in a bubble. And I just knew that whatever I did after college, it had to involve me living abroad. That was pretty much after Harvard, that was then my goal. So I had this day, which I detail in the book a little bit, where I was kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do after graduation. I had 2 meetings set up in London. One was at the Tate Modern for an art job, and one was at the Gender Institute at the London School of Economics. And that was like a real crossroads moment for me. My life went in one direction that kind of set everything else in motion. What then happened for the next 15 years after that.
Wow.
There were sort of no opportunities for me in the art world, but I was welcomed with open arms to the LSE, to their master's program. And it was part of the plan. The plan was to come do a master's for a year and spend that year figuring out how to get a job and a more permanent visa so I could stay in the UK for longer.
And take us forward from there.
Well, so I did my master's. I did the thing. I got a job offer. I got a visa, but I fell in love. I met my now husband in grad school. We were introduced by our grandmothers. We were both in London at the same time, but I love to joke that I traveled all the way to the UK to end up with a Miami boy from a Cuban-American family. And so, our grandparents were neighbors in Cuba. Our dads were friends growing up. We had very strong family connections.
Wow.
When we got together, it was immediately, within 2 weeks, we were already madly in love with each other. So I had my job and my visa. He did not have a job offer and a visa. And so he convinced me to move to New York with him after grad school instead. And I was able to get my job offer transferred. It was with Monitor Group, big strategy consulting firm, now defunct. And they were fine to transfer my offer to the New York office. And so we left London and moved to New York with the promise that I wanted to come back. As soon as we could figure out a way to sort out 2 visas instead of 1, we were going to come back to the UK because I really wanted to be back here. But New York was, no terrible consolation prize, home of Broadway, my lifelong love.
Right.
A lot of my friends had gravitated there after college. I had always loved New York. I'd been a handful of times, but just thought it was an incredible city. So I wasn't so upset at the shift at the time.
Yeah.
And I was madly in love and
right. I think that's really funny that you met him in London, but your that your father knew his father. That's really amazing.
Hilarious.
So, and I know that your time at the Monitor Group was not the easiest.
Short and not so sweet, I would say. I mean, look, it was just not the job for me.
Right.
It was not the job for me. I learned a ton. In 4 months, I learned lessons that I still now, not quite, but nearly 20 years later, still bring into my life and my job. I learned how to use Excel and PowerPoint there. I learned a lot about business and how businesses work. But it just wasn't the right fit for me. I was not interested in the work I was doing. I was mostly consulting to pharmaceutical companies on their marketing strategy. I didn't feel like there was any purpose, and I had spent all this time thinking about my purpose and studying, how to make the world a better place for people. And I just wasn't doing any of that. And it was very punishing, it was very early mornings, very late nights, often working on the weekends, for a job that I didn't really care very much about.
Right.
And so I ran into a girlfriend from college at a bar one night. And she said, I'm working for this company. We do corporate philanthropy consulting. And it was something I happened to know about. I had written my master's dissertation all about corporate philanthropy programs that supported women and girls. shoved it in a drawer, never thought I would use it again for the rest of my life.
Wow.
And sure enough, here's this friend from college telling me that she does a whole job in that field. So she said, send me your dissertation and maybe, we might be hiring soon. So I'll let you know. And they offered me a job and I decided to take it. I left Monitor after 4 months.
Yeah.
I think I spent a month of that maybe on vacation. I'm not sure. I definitely took like a week and a half off for Christmas. I had to pay back my signing bonus. I took a big pay cut. But it was worth it because I felt like I was really energized doing the kind of work that I thought I would get to do.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I went to work for Changing Our World. They were called a consulting firm in New York, doing what was originally called corporate philanthropy consulting. And that was my first, I count that as like my first real job.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was like a amuse bouche for the real job.
Yeah. And how long were you there for?
I stayed at Changing Our World for, 3.5 years, almost 4 years. In that time, I got engaged and realized that if I could find a way for myself to get back to the UK, I could bring my married spouse as a dependent on whatever visa I was on. So that became my focus again. I found like an obscure visa program that does not exist anymore. It was called the Highly Skilled Migrant Program. It was a points-based system. I think I don't know, there was like, the application was like 500 pages of supporting documents and every single thing you had ever done in your life and your art teacher's recommendation from 3rd grade and your dental records and like God knows what else. But they granted me a 3-year visa and I stayed with Changing Our World for the first 6, almost 7 months after I moved to the UK as a consultant and working on some European clients for them. But then I got my dream. I got to move to London, got married, got to pack my now husband over and come back to London, which is where I really wanted to be. So we moved to London in February of 2008.
And so you continued with Changing Our World and and you were doing some work for them, but you couldn't continue with them, or did you want to make a change, or?
This was 2008. Okay.
Right.
No Zoom, no FaceTime. I would be in team meetings, where there was like one speakerphone in the middle of the table and I'm like desperately trying to listen to everybody talking. It was not feasible at that point in time the way it is now. To be one person alone in like a satellite office. So I was lonely. I was lonely. The work was still interesting, but I felt I missed having a team. I missed going into an office every day. And, I felt stagnant at that point in my career. And there were, it was more of a lifestyle issue than anything else. I still loved my team. I was just so far away from them. And so I had made the choice to move. So it became very clear to me I needed to go be in an office around people. And do something different. And so I applied almost out of the blue for a job at Standard Chartered Bank, doing that same type of work, corporate philanthropy, corporate social responsibility, but in-house for the bank. And somehow I got that job. I mean, it was kind of a miracle. So many things. I'm a hard worker and I'm smart and I bring a lot to my work, but so many opportunities were a matter of being in the right place at the right time. It's really kind of incredible how different, if one thing might have been different, they happened to be looking for someone with my particular experience. They needed someone right away. I started at the bank and like a week later, Lehman Brothers crashed. And then there was a hiring freeze, but I was in.
Oh, wow. That's great.
And so I did that job for, until right after I had my twins. 5 years. I stayed there. And it was incredible. I was working for a very large multinational company for the first time. My job involved a lot of travel. I was building a program that the bank was going to fund that was focused on helping adolescent girls access sports and financial literacy and reproductive health and empowerment education. And so I had this extraordinary opportunity to work with the nonprofit partners in India and then eventually China, Zambia, Jordan, the UK. Now the program is in like 35 different countries. It's amazing.
Wow.
But to really build that from the ground up with the nonprofit partners, to go to all these places that I had never been, fulfill that itch for travel, use my strategic brain and feel like I was doing a lot of good. And work in a big bank and learn what that was like, because that environment, a very unique environment that I had never been in before.
Yeah. And yet you were also in a very unique role within that unique environment, right?
I was a cost center, which is how they always refer to us, right?
Really?
So, yeah. I mean, it's very funny. You know, I worked in until the point where I got to my what if year inflection point. I had been working with companies in companies for 15 years, and it is very, you know, it's a very challenging world to do that kind of job in a company, because even with a very, very tiny number of exceptions, you know, companies are still very, very focused on profit. So when you are working in a role where you're trying to get money out the door, it can be really challenging. You're constantly proving your worth over and over. Every time a new boss gets hired, you're proving your worth. But I loved it. I loved the challenge. And I felt like it was a very diverse role. You know, I didn't love working in a huge company, but I loved the opportunities that it afforded me. And again, I was still pretty young, and I got to do some really incredible things.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like it was so aligned with what you did in grad school, and there's just, yeah, it sounds like an incredible opportunity. So like then you became a mother. There was a whole nother career.
Correct.
Right?
My first unpaid internship that's never going to be over.
That's right. Right.
I had twins in 2011. And then because I was in the UK, I got a very long maternity leave. I ended up getting 14 months off.
Wow.
When I counted all my vacation days and everything like that. And that was a journey in and of itself. You know, I had you know, I had a lot of struggles to get to the point where I had my twins. Then they were early. And that first year was like a blur. My mom took a bunch of videos and she sent them to me, all edited for like the twins' first or second birthday, I think. And I burst into tears because I was like, I don't remember any of it. I've like blocked it all out.
Yeah.
It was tough. It was really, really tough. It was really tough, but I had this very long break, which I was very grateful for. And I was ready to go back to work after that break, more than ready, I think. But I went back to the bank and, you know, they had restructured. I was really tired, frankly, of having to like constantly prove the worth of my team again and again and again.
Yeah.
And I was ready for a new challenge. So I ended up moving over to another big company, which was not my expectation, but to a corporate foundation. Thomson Reuters, the big news and information brand.
Yeah.
To run a team called Trust Law, which was essentially a platform for nonprofits and social enterprises around the world to find pro bono legal services.
Wow.
Law firms, they gave it all up. So then I spent like 3 years hanging out with lawyers, doing a lot more travel, managing a large team, which was something I really wanted the experience of doing. And really kind of growing into my life as a working mom, which was a big transition. And big change.
So you did that for about 3 years, you said, right?
Yeah.
And you had little ones at home.
And I had little ones at home.
And you were traveling.
And a week before I found out that I was having twins, my husband, Carlos, who had also been in the nonprofit sector for many years, he had worked on the fundraising side of things, had been a major gifts fundraiser. And then when we moved to the UK, he was consulting. He wanted to start a full service consulting firm on his own that would do fundraising, but also the kind of work that I was doing, working with companies, as well as working with wealthy individuals and their families and their foundations, all around the different issues of giving. And so he set off on his own with my nights and weekends support. And we set up IG Advisors And we registered the company, and a week later I found out I was having twins. So
wow.
that was also happening at the same time of figuring out how to be a working mom, doing my job, and then also sort of doing the COO role and like a little, kind of undercover consultant for the company that we had set up.
Oh, wow. But you ended up working full time with your husband. Is that right?
I did. So
was that after the trust law?
Yep.
Yeah.
So after trust law, I had been there about 2.5 years, and the business had grown to the point where we could afford to put all our eggs in that one basket. It needed another senior person to come on board. That senior person was going to have to be me. I wasn't going to let anybody else do it.
Yeah.
And I wanted, those early years were so overwhelming in so many ways,
Yeah.
and working a job that required me to be somewhere at 8 or 8:30 in the morning and leave at 6 or 7 o'clock at night. During the week, I would not see the babies at all. I'd see them for 20 minutes in the morning, and I'd see them for 20 minutes in the evening. And it just did not feel like that life could be sustainable for me. My lifelong ambition to always be the best, to keep climbing the ladder, I had to stop and rethink that after I had kids, because that wasn't the only thing I wanted anymore. I also wanted to be home enough to see them. I wanted to be able to, when they started school, I wanted to be able to go by the school and see the ballet performance if that was going to be happening. And I didn't want to have to constantly be asking for permission or feeling, like I was on the back foot because I was a mom. I was the only person on my team at Thomson Reuters that had children at the time.
Oh, wow.
And my boss was older. She had grown up children, but there were no other moms. And that was really tough. Nobody else really understood. And I felt like I had to work twice as hard to show that moms weren't, lazy or constantly leaving so it was very, very tough. So the opportunity to join our business full time, to be my own boss, because I told my husband, you're not allowed to be my boss ever. I will obviously be my own boss. To have that kind of flexibility and to grow what we were building together, it was the perfect time to leave. So I made the jump in 2015, and then I took over as CEO in 2017.
Okay. So, and your husband, is he still running that business now?
So we still own it. He set up 2 other companies in the meantime.
Oh, wow.
So at the point at which the inciting incidents of my what if year start, which was early 2019, he was spending most of his time on his other businesses.
Oh, I see.
I was running the day-to-day operations of IG with the team, and we were both the board, but our time was split, and his time was very, very split. So me deciding, as I did in 2019, throughout the course of the year, that I wasn't happy doing that anymore, that I wanted to do something different. That thing that was different was going to be a series of unpaid internships and jobs I always dreamt of doing. It was a really big shakeup across our entire family, because it wasn't my job and my career. It was our company and, our work. And so, a lot of people have asked me was it difficult for your husband to get him to agree to watch the twins while you went to New York? And I was like, that was not the hard part. Actually, the hard part was having to help him understand that this thing we had built together, that wasn't where I saw my life anymore. And that was very difficult for him to kind of come to terms with.
Wow. So, so take us there, because we really want to dive into this. So you said there were inciting incidents that led to what if year?
That's like your writing term, right? Your writing term is you start your book out with an inciting incident. What is the thing that kicks off your whole story?
Yeah.
And that is what I have come to think about the first scene of my book, which was this weekend with 2 of my best girlfriends in London, away from our kids, having drinks and just doing that thing you do with your longtime friends over cocktails, which was talking about what we wanted to do and where we wanted to be and where we were. And I had the idea of doing internships, particularly in musical theater. That was like really where the seed came from, as a way to explore a different aspect of my professional life, my creative life, to shake myself out of my rut, stop feeling so stuck. And I shared this with them. And instead of like laughing at me, they were like, that's a great idea. What other internships would you do? Maybe you should do a whole year of internships. Maybe I should do a whole year of internships. You know, the night went on and on and on. But I think of that as the beginning for me, because that was the first time I had said it out loud.
Yeah.
And that it stopped being this thing that was just like, oh, that's never going to happen in the back of my head. And actually became something. Now I was accountable to these two other people who were very important to me with this idea that I had shared with them.
Wow. I think about how many times I've either been in those conversations with people or overheard them with other people. And you had that conversation and actually did it.
Yeah. Well, with a long gap in between, but yes.
Yeah. So, right. So
a year and a bit.
Right. So, I am curious about wanting to do an internship in musical theater. You lived in London at the time, right?
Yeah.
Why not do it in London? Why New York? Was that a consideration?
Well, the West End is great, but there's nothing like Broadway. Broadway is
I agree, but
so that was part of it. But I had basically once I decided I was going to do it, and once I got over the 8 months of sort of emotional dithering about whether or not I was actually going to do it or not.
Yeah.
But when I really said, I'm doing this in early 2020, this is happening, this is how I'm going to spend my year, I went full Alisha on the whole plan. I made a cajillion spreadsheets. I went through everybody I knew on LinkedIn. So you ask why New York? It was because I reached out to everybody I knew and who knew anybody I knew in London. And I reached out to everybody I knew who knew anybody I knew in New York.
So you really cast the net widely.
New York.
Exactly.
See. Exactly. So I got an opportunity to come to New York to shadow and help where I could in two musicals that were scheduled to open in April 2020. One was at Lincoln Center called Flying Over Sunset, a Broadway musical. And the other one was off-Broadway, Assassins at the Classic Stage Company, with two legendary directors. Couldn't say no to that. That was it. That was like my lifelong dream coming true.
Right. So you got two. So you were able to orchestrate working on two shows at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, they were at different stages. And really, the show at Lincoln Center was already in tech. So they didn't need much from me.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Being able to appreciate that process and observe. The show at Classic Stage was just, I arrived the first day of rehearsals. So that was being part of the rehearsal process. And to be honest, nobody needed me. I worked very hard to try to make myself useful.
Yes. And that's a really fun part of the book to see. Here you are, you've been a CEO of a company, you've worked with all these well-heeled people doing philanthropy work and all these things. And there you are just trying to see if anyone wants a cup of coffee.
Please, for the love of God.
Please.
I mean, I was like offering to buy, I was like, let me buy you coffee just so I can get you coffee.
Yeah.
Let me be
helpful.
Maybe you don't want to buy a $7 latte, which is what they cost in New York.
Right.
I'll buy it for you. Just please let me do something useful.
Right. I want to be useful. I'm the intern, let me get the coffee. So you fulfilled this dream working on these two musicals, or interning, or watching the process and making yourself useful, right?
Yeah.
So was it everything you hoped it would be?
And more. Honestly, I would do it again in a heartbeat. I am still constantly trying to see if people will let me sit in on their musical. Yeah, it was. I mean, it's a job like any job. Sure. But to be surrounded by the talent, by the creative teams, to be working on something that is going to be, yes, there's a whole commercial side of the business, but that's really about bringing a piece of art to life using music, using acting. I mean, it was extraordinary. It was extraordinary. It was so great. And I would do it again. And if the pandemic hadn't happened, I might have just stayed.
And did you know at the time that you would end up writing a book about all of this?
I mean, that seemed like an even more far-fetched fantasy than doing all of the internships.
Wow.
The idea was there, but I wasn't really taking it seriously. I shared it with some people that couldn't quite understand why I was going off to do a project like this for nothing but my own personal fulfillment and professional fulfillment. Like, without a goal at the end of it, it seemed insane that I was leaving my house, leaving my husband, leaving my kids, leaving my job, going to do these internships. But if I told those people, oh, and I'm going to write a book about it, then they were like, oh, of course, that's a legitimate reason.
Right.
So, and I was journaling, I was taking notes, but more than anything, because I knew the experience was going to be extraordinary for me. I didn't know how. But after my first internship, so my first internship started February 29th, 2020. You can do the math in the calendar.
Yes.
Had a very dramatic end to it where I had to turn around and come home within 24 hours, and then shortly after we went into lockdown here in the UK, very restrictive lockdown.
Right.
And I was just completely bereft. And I didn't know what to do. And my husband actually said, why don't you turn your notes about New York into a story? And so I did. And I found that I loved writing about it, that it was very cathartic and that I loved the writing process. And, you mentioned before we started recording, Tammy, about weaving stories from the past into stories with the present. But a lot of that just came kind of naturally to me, almost, because as I was thinking about these things happening to me in the current moment, I could see the threads from my childhood, from my early working years. And it was like therapy. I was figuring out what was wrong with me and what I needed to do next. And the writing was my vehicle for doing that. So, I kept it up. And when I had a cohesive narrative, I also knew what I needed to do with the next stage of my life. Then, of course, I had to go back and rewrite everything I'd written before because it was wrong. But it's not wrong, but needed a fresh eye. But the writing is really what helped me figure out where I wanted to be, where I was going, and what I was doing. So all of the stuff that came after being a book, all of the publicity, that's just been like the cherry on top of the frosting on top of it's like the most unbelievable thing to me.
Yeah. So tell us all about the book, My What If Year, a memoir. Tell us more about that. You go into quite a bit of detail about your experience on Broadway, but I know there's more to it. Tell us more.
Yeah. So in spite of the global pandemic throughout 2020, I managed to complete 3 other internships. Wow. I worked for a retro dance and fitness company. During the height of lockdown, I was a virtual intern for them. So I did all of that. And many, many, many exercise classes in front of my living room TV with my kids doing homeschool behind me on the dining table.
Wow.
Those pictures are fun. And then between the 2 UK lockdowns, I completed 2 other internships. So I worked for an art dealer, contemporary art dealer in London, buying and selling very high-end painting and sculpture. And then I worked at a hotel and restaurant on the beautiful Isle of Skye in Scotland. And I was completely terrible at every single task I took on there. Waitressing, checking people in and out, you name it. I sucked at it. Like, I was so bad at everything. And then I got to the end of my year and I really just sort of realized I learned so much about myself, about what I wanted, about how I had been defining success, about what I wanted to do next in my professional life, which was not go back to my old job and my old life and my old everything.
Right.
And my entire life changed as a result of that.
Well, you live in Scotland now. I know that changed.
I live in Scotland. That was one thing. I am ex-CEO, no longer current CEO, which was another big thing. I am an author of a book, which was
Yes.
another big thing.
A
That's
fabulous
like my
book.
fifth internship, basically, which was like writing this book and finding a love for writing. And I just have a completely different approach to how I make decisions about my career, about how I choose to spend my time, about how I set goals and plan them, really centering things like joy, like learning, like appreciating the growth that comes from failure were never priorities for me, even though they probably should have been. The things that had been driving me in the first 40 years of my life were success, better title, being good at what I do, getting the best education, making more money, all of those things.
Yeah.
And now, in the very nascent stages of the second 40 years of my life, I'm being driven by something different.
Yeah. And it's not the exact opposite of everything. It's just a redefinition, because you still have the drive and the energy. You still want to excel, but it's a different set of standards that you set for yourself, right?
And a recognition that I don't have to excel all the time. I
Right.
will never stop being the person that I am. I will always be that very, very driven little girl.
Sure.
But I think that there were parts of that helped make me successful, that helped spur me on, that kept me working hard when I wanted to give up. But there were parts of that were not so healthy, that were maybe stopping me from doing things that I loved because I didn't feel like I could be the best at them. If I wasn't going to be the best at something, like the Harvard Crimson,
yeah,
that was it. I wasn't going to do it. Whereas now I realize I don't have to be the best at everything. I don't always have to be the best.
And you're willing to try more things, and you've expanded your horizons.
Exactly.
So we're going to wrap up for now, which I'm saying it with a little bit of pain, but what's the best way for people to find you and learn more about you and what you're doing these days?
Well, obviously by my book, because that's my whole life story. And
absolutely,
I'm out of things to say after that.
It's a great book.
So my What If Year, you can buy it anywhere that books are sold. I have a website, which is alishafmiranda.com, which I keep updated pretty regularly. And then I'm on Instagram. I spend too much time on Instagram. I'm at Alisha F. Miranda on Instagram as well.
Great. And if you were to give somebody a piece of advice about making a transition in their life, what would be a key piece of advice you might give them?
Here is something that I have learned only fairly recently, I would say. And I think you and your community, Tammy, are part of it. I think when I was going through these feelings, just thinking I wanted to change or have a transition, not knowing if I should be feeling guilty about that, I felt very alone.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of putting my story out there and putting the book out there, I have met so many incredible people, yourself included, who are so aligned with that. So my advice would be that if this is something that you're feeling, to find your community. You don't have to look very far. You can probably just go to Google or your chosen social media platform.
Yeah.
And you will find brilliant people, brilliant communities of people as well, who are there to support you, to help you. There are resources. There are other stories of people who have succeeded. There are people willing to make connections for you. I mean, there is this whole world of individuals who realize that your working life is long and maybe you don't want to do the same thing all through it.
Yeah.
And they're there to help. And so that would be my advice, to not feel like you are alone and to reach out to find communities of people who have been through it or who are going through it, because who knows what I would have done if I had those kinds of groups.
Right.
And how much more supercharged my own journey could have been.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that I am part of those communities now, but they exist. And so find them. You don't have to do it alone.
Yeah. I love it. I'm going to leave it at that. Alisha, thank you so much for being here today. This has been pure joy for me.
Such a pleasure to talk to you, Tammy. Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Alisha Fernandez Miranda. It was so much fun to speak with her and learn about her early life, all the transitions she's made, and her book. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygulerloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 225. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out, Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career that Fulfills You. It's available through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or through your local library. If you were inspired by this episode with Alisha, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. If you're enjoying the podcast, I'd be so grateful to read your written review on Apple Podcasts. Just go to tammygulerloeb.com/podcast, click on the Apple Podcasts button, follow the instructions, and you'll be able to write your review there. You can also help sustain this podcast by buying me a cup of coffee. Just go to buymeacupofcoffee.com/TammyGL. Since this podcast is self-funded, I would so appreciate your support. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.